if everything is going well, no one really need to think too much about the culture. But I think the cultures and all of these things is more and more getting important when some difficult situation happens.
Hello and welcome to the INSEAD Emerging Markets Podcast, where we interview business leaders and emerging market experts on business innovations, market opportunities, and macro-level trends in emerging and frontier market countries. Join us for the next hour to dive deep into the world of emerging markets as we speak with top performers who are successfully investing, working, and living in these markets themselves. Welcome to the INSEAD Emerging Markets Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Lall, and our guest today is Kaoru Kaganoi. Kaoru is an INSEAD 16J, and he is the founder of Peach Tech, which is the leading used car marketplace in East Africa. Kaoru has lived a truly INSEAD life growing up in France, working at McKinsey in Tokyo, and then shifting to its Nairobi office post-MBA, in addition to doing development work in Bangladesh, Tuvalu, and Palestine, and ultimately leading the geographical expansion of SafeBoda, a motorcycle taxi hailing company in East Africa, before founding Peach Tech. So to say you've lived an interesting life would be quite an understatement. I was wondering if you could just share a little bit about your early years and what influences may have led you to leading such an international impact-focused lifestyle.
Sure. Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for having me, and it's been an honor to share a bit of my stories. It's an event or inspiration to someone else. So thank you again for the opportunity. So yeah, maybe to begin was to answer to your question of a bit of where this internationally working or where it's coming from. I might say it started a little bit from when I was spending my time when I was really small in Paris. So I'm Japanese by nationality, but I also spent a few years when I was really small in Paris, which is due to my father's work. He's a French philosophy professor. Being a Japanese, I still don't really understanding how that has happened to him as his career choice. But thanks to that, I had a very early days exposure to a different culture. And maybe that was also the first time I started to be really understanding what does it mean to be associated with a nationality or maybe a race as well. So I think that was the beginning, and it was really great. And also there was some negative impact as well too. For instance, it's kind of made me difficult to reintegrating back to the Japanese culture, because I think the Japanese culture is a very one single style in that sense. So someone who be not Japanese or coming from different countries or grown up in different parts might not necessarily be feeling that super close to how they are, or they don't want to be dealing the same way. So I think there was a bit of a downside, but also I think I did see a way different side of the upper side of knowing different countries and different cultures and the environment. Because I think I have started to be learning my sky is not limited just inside of Japan, but I could be anywhere else. I could have a different life if I really wanted to starting from the scratch again. So it's kind of funny because I have shared this story with a lot of INSEAD folks when I was at INSEAD. And that I think a lot of INSEAD people might be recognizing themselves as a global citizens more than any of the nationalities attached to them. And then I think I feel in that way. So to be honest, when I was really small, because there was a bit of downside when I came back from Paris or France to Japan, I was not necessarily super excited about having my international career or international life right after. But that kind of opened up my eyes to see not only inside of Japan, but always having on the back of my mind, there are a different world, different countries, different things happening somewhere else in the world. So maybe that was one first good way of thinking about international, or what does that mean to be in a country. And then from there, I think I pursued my life to be as a part of Japanese culture for a while. But then I kind of start to be okay, I start to be feeling not very satisfied. And I start to be feeling a little bit kind of how to say, maybe my growth and opportunity being sold by being inside of Japan. So I kind of wanted to start seeking for an opportunity, and I wanted to push myself to kind of going back to the international environment. So I took my opportunity to actually do some internship in Bangladesh at Grameen Bank when I was in the second year in my undergrad. So I think that's also opened up my eyes toward the international career and what's happening outside of the world. At that time, I think a few things kind of hit me in a way. Was one is being outside of Japan is kind of such a different setup. For instance, in Japan, I feel the entire society has been designed to be connected to the experience. So that ages and your experience matters a lot. So if you're like younger in like early 20s, most of the people might not necessarily be like willing to listen to you. But when I have my opportunity to do some internship work in Bangladesh, people were way more open, listening regardless my age or my career or my experience. If there's something valuable, they've been like super open to listen to it. So I think that was kind of an interesting way to see. I learned a lot. I thought I was down there to try to help and finding something cool. But I think I rather feel I've been taught a lot of different things from that experience down there. So I think that was a good entry point. And then I think it's actually really made me think of what does the, how to say, being well in a wealthy country means. I thought Japan as a country, I think it's very economically advanced and pretty much interesting country. But also if I were to think of like, are the people living in Japan unhappy? My answer is I'm not sure about that. And then I think Bangladesh was maybe on the opposite side. Maybe the country seems more economically developed, but I think the people that I have met and interacted down there had way more like hope and dream and energies. So that was such an eye-opening moment for me. And then I definitely liked to be in that environment. So from there, I think I passed it a little bit and continued working. And so Bangladesh Grameen Bank was kind of good experience to be in the impact-oriented business environment. And then I wasn't really sure if I wanted to keep on having my international career, like how I can create the impact to the society. So I kind of wanted to pass you to see how I feel if I've been in the part of the NGO or NPO, like non-profit organization or non-governmental organization. So I wanted to have that experience. I pushed myself to go to Tuvalu, which is the Pacific Island country, which is supposed to be going under the sea level because of the current climate change. So it will be the first country to disappear from the map due to the sea level rise. So that I was helping one of the non-profit organization down there for a bit of time. That also made me realizing why and then how the donation dependent organization, sometimes their strategic directions or the project overall could have been affected by the donors. Obviously, there are positive side on it too, but from my perspective, I wanted to create some sort of sustainable solutions that I can keep the impact down there, like in the society. So from that perspective, I thought maybe going to a charity side of the world or the nation-based entity was not necessarily what I wanted to be going after. Yeah, and then also I think I had my opportunity to really travel around inside of Africa just before I graduated from my undergrad. I took 6 months off and then travel in Africa and also in South America. This also really showed me how much potential, how much part of the world that I haven't still been seen does exist and how exciting it is. And then so I think during this trip, I was pretty much making my mind, hey, after my undergrad, I really would like to take up on an opportunity to start having my international career, or at least I wanted to start thinking beyond inside of my own country. So maybe that was like how it's been started, if I do answer to some of your questions.
No, that's really helpful. And I think that I've seen that as well coming from the US. I mean, definitely very different culture from Japan, but the US versus some of these emerging market countries, you just go there and people are so much more optimistic about the future, and happiness, as you mentioned, is a big factor there. I think we talk about market potential or impact we can make in these countries, but there is part of it that's just being around people who are happy and optimistic. It makes it more exciting to work in those sort of places. So appreciate that perspective. And I guess maybe to follow up on that, I mean, it seems like very early in your career, you were looking for places that you could help people make impact. And I guess not only were you looking internationally to get out of Japan, but you were going to places like Bangladesh, Tuvalu, even backpacking through Africa. I was curious if there was anything in particular that attracted you to go to these sort of countries, and if there were any life experiences, or if you think it's just something innate that made you feel the need to make a difference in the world.
Yeah, that's a super interesting question. I think I will be answering some of my honest answers. So I think, some of them has happened based on my own willingness to go and experiencing different places. And to be I think the first things has happened to me was when at my third year, fourth year of my undergrad, I already started doing job hunting. If you know about Japan, they really start a job hunting in the very early days. Maybe from a mid third year of the undergrad, you might be doing the job hunting continuously up until you found something that you like to do. So obviously, like I kind of had the social pressure that I shall be following that path. But at the same time, some part of me inside of me was keep on telling me, hey, like, are you sure this is what you want to be doing? And are you ready to choose the job that you want to be taking on a few years at least? And then I think my answer was no. Like I was like, I really want to see what else I can do, where the opportunity could potentially be like, does exist. So I think it was like too early for me to make my first career decision at that age. So I rather prefer to stop and try to see and observing what's happening in the rest of the world before it was, or like, before I need to make that choice. And then, so I think that was the first things has happened to me. And then the second from there, why I choose to be in Africa, why I choose to be in South America before my graduation was partially logical, but sounds like a very preliminary logic, which was like, hey, I'm living in Japan. To travel in Southeast Asia, going to Australia, etc. will be way easier in any time of my career. So I would prefer to take a chunk of the time that I can travel farther away. So then it was like South America and Africa been quite far in that sense. And I decided to start my journey from Africa. And then I know like this sounds a little bit short-sighted, but there was one of really close friend someone who I used to be dated with has found her opportunity in Africa. She's also Japanese and she decided to be based in Rwanda at the time. So that made me thinking of, okay, I want to start from Africa and then I will see how I want to be proceeding during my trip. She's been a really good friend. She's been like really into the impact side. And also she has been introduced me to a few of the books that I've been like inspired in the early days. Like one of the example is called Bruce Sweater, which is like written by Jacqueline Novogratz, who started the Acumen Fund based in US, but I think she's really providing a lot of impact support across the world. And then when I read this book, it was actually, so the Bruce Sweater is like a theme is like, so Jacqueline Novogratz donated a Bruce sweater when she was in a very small, her preferred Bruce sweater has been donated by her mother to an organization. And one day when she was watching a news or TV show on TV, she found that a girl based in Africa wearing this Bruce sweater. So that made her think of how the world is small or how it's very well connected. And then she decided to start passing her career. So that book was also quite interesting for me. And I was like, I wanted to see how this story has happened, in which part of the world this type of the story has happened, etc. So I think those were the decisions that I have made, me being like super early 20s or like a very early 20s. I made that decision and I decided to travel down there. So yeah. And then when I was traveling in Africa in 2011, so that was the first time, and then I came back in 2016, my first impression at the time was, maybe this is a little bit too early to really doing a business or trying to be down there, because I thought value adding I might be able to providing was a little bit limited. That was my feeling at the time. Then I wasn't really sure like what I can do on the ground. And then that has been changed for the second time when I visited the region in 2016, thanks to the INSEAD experience. So yeah. I mean, I can talk a bit more about it, but I think that's how I ended to be starting to traveling inside of Africa and also in South America before my graduation. And I think that's significantly affected my career perspective and my professional life.
Sure. I think that's the way you should do it. I think knowing what path to take when you're fresh out of college is not really realistic. And it's great to go travel different places, experience different things. I mean, it's kind of funny that you mentioned that, but my first really big trip was to Southeast Asia. And part of the reason was that I knew a lot of people from college who were living in Asia. And then I had the same thinking that being from the US at any age, I can go to Europe or Latin America is easy. So I want to go somewhere far away. And then ended up loving it and spending a lot more time there. So it sounds kind of similar to your experience.
Yeah, definitely. But I think sometime, like if you were to think back about these things, these like small, I don't know, I might call like not necessarily super logical, like not necessarily super well thought logic. But I think these small decisions helped us where we are at today. And I think it's really important when you start having that thought, just take the first action and try to leap into it. And then, like exploring it could actually affect how you think, and what you're going to find out from down there can really affect the career. And then,
Absolutely.
I kind of, for a while, I was a bit nervous about sharing this type of the story because it sounds like too straightforward or, like a not well thought things. But I mean, I think that's the reality. And then I think it's also, I do appreciate the fact I thought in that manner because otherwise I won't be who I am today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just taking that action and then you can learn so much from the world rather than spending all the time in your head trying to figure things out. It's often makes
100%.
sense just to. So post college, you worked for McKinsey and then you did that in Tokyo for a while, then went to INSEAD and then shifted to the Nairobi office. I was wondering if you could just cover that maybe a little bit briefly and explain your thinking in terms of why going into consulting, why shifting to Africa, how did that impact your career after that?
Sure. So first things, I really wanted to be so after I have experience in Bangladesh for Grameen Bank to be in the impact organization and then seeing Tuvalu for NPO and then also traveling around meeting some interesting people doing different stuff in the world. That kind of brought me into or made me very much interested into the business world because I thought business can be or if you can really finding impactful business, it could be a long-term solution which can last longer than anything else. So I really wanted to understand that one better and then also to make it happen one day or to be on that side. Early 20s myself thought, I would really want to be learning from a key decision makers, how they make a decision, how these things works as a system. So when I start to be thinking in that manner, consulting sounds like a perfect match for that because it's kind of almost like a doctor for a company. So I'm walking into down there, try to learn, even I'm not necessarily knowing most of the things, but I can really learn what's going on and then I can learn a lot from that one. So I think that was a bit of thought how I start be thinking about my career. Then I was kind of leaning toward the business world per se. So that was one. And then also the second element is because my undergrad was nothing to do with business. So I actually studied international transaction law. So my background on the legal side. And then when I decided to shift from the legal to the business world, I wasn't sure even where to look for a job or what kind of things might match my personality and my career aspirations well. In a lucky way, one of the professor I studied with or studied kind of supported for on some of the research, etc., he used to be working for a Boston consulting firm. So then he was the one who actually told me about a little bit more about the consulting world and how these things could work. So yeah, that's kind of made me being interested into the consulting world. And then so I started working in Japan in 2012, just after straight under college. In a funny way, I still remember that my last day of the internship for McKinsey's job interview was the day that the 3/11 hit Japan. So I got a massive earthquake happening in their office space that also enabled me to meet way more different consultants because all of us need to be evacuated from the building and we need to be standing outside barefoot for maybe 45 minutes before the building has been confirmed to be safe to go back. So that was a bit of different side story of how I ended up in a consulting firm too. But I think that was how I ended up being in McKinsey. And then I really liked was how they've been reacting on that type of catastrophic situation, how much care they put into protecting their employees and how they thought of the different options. And they really gave a great opportunity for everyone to if family or if you need to be going forward, you should go now. And then they've been very open to it and they really show their interest or they put the employees first before the company's interest. So that also made me very excited to join them. So anyway, so I think I have joined after that one in 2012. And then obviously, as you can imagine, Japanese working hours quite intense. So I think my work life was not really work-life balance. It was a work balance because I have this weird feeling, but I mean kind of how to say, insecure overachievers type of the personality. So it's every single day I need to push myself. So at some point I start to be feeling okay, if the work is not under control, I'm always anxious about it. And my brains keep on thinking about the project rather than me being in the moment. So at some point I have just figured out my own way to cooperating with it to really push myself, keep on working until I feel okay, something is under control. So that took me maybe a year or a year and a half to finding really a good balancing between like workaholic versus, having my own moments as well. But also at the same time, I think it's really enables me to see a different angle and then different like important things in the professional career, such as like meeting a deadline. Like it really need to be a detail oriented, like why everything need to be coherent, everything need to be very logical. And then my working hours was like a really different in between, I don't know, around 60 hours a week on the lighter side. And then I think some of my most intense week was around 120 hours a week,
Wow.
which is like 20 hours for 5 days a week plus 10 hours for both like weekends. So that was definitely a super crazy lifestyle. And then also I have a moment, one morning I woke up and I couldn't even move my finger, even my brain is awake. So I thought, oh, this is how the people might actually die out of like overworking. So, I mean, that was also a good, way of like knowing my own boundaries or my limits. Well, I mean, obviously, like, fortunately, I didn't die. I needed to take a few more hours of sleep than I could be back to functioning. But I think, I mean, that was like super intense first 2 to 3 years. But I think I have gained a lot of confidence of being a professional. So many people ask me like, hey, what was the things you have learned at McKinsey if I need to choose one? My answer will be confidence on myself and being a very capable professional, I think. So from that perspective, being me super naive when I finished my undergrad, being a crazy, like insecure overachiever type of the personality, I think that was needed. So I think that's how my life looked like a little bit. But I also had a great opportunity to work with so many different clients from like different industries. So I covered from the finance industry all the way to the manufacturing, like power gen, etc. There was a day that after 2 months intense project, I was like crying together because something went super well and it was very emotional with our clients. So obviously there was like some of the great moments that ideally, like, I think I will remember for the entire rest of my life. Also, obviously, there was a very shitty day that I made some wrong calculations or my logic was wrong. And then I need to have super a long night to try to fix it. And then almost customer being very angry or the clients being not happy at all. So after 3 years and a half, I think that was my time that I started be thinking, hey, like, I think I have done enough. I think I proved myself and also to the company that I am capable. And then I started looking for the next challenge. And I think that was one of the things was like, okay, if I know I am a capable professional in Japan, can I be a capable professional in the global level? So that was maybe like my next challenge I wanted to going after. And then to change my career and be more global, I think one of a natural transition to me was to going into the MBA and then starting my career transition. So I think that was how I decided to go to INSEAD. And obviously INSEAD was great. Like really, like I have learned so many different things from different classmates, and some of their like lifetime experiences were very different, but yet like a very inspirational thing. So I really like that moment. And then throughout that time, I also had my opportunity to come back to the continent again, seeing how much Nairobi and Kenya changed in the 5 years time was fascinating. So I really wanted to be the part of change, and I really wanted to be there to really understanding what's going on, how this dynamic market is happening, what will happen next. Also at the same time, they are gathering or they are attracting a lot of international talents to the region. So that was really exciting for me. So I think that trip really made me convinced, or I finally made up my mind of, okay, after the graduation, I definitely want to be based somewhere else. And so obviously I had a bit of like a time I spent in Palestine, in Israel side as a transition of my career after my MBA. But I thought I would be preferred to be based in East Africa. So I kind of dig deeper inside of the McKinsey's network because I've been sponsored by them for my MBA. So it was kind of one of the easier way to finding how I can transitioning the location, not necessarily changing the industry and my company. So that's how I started to be looking into it. And then luckily enough, used to be the head of Tokyo office was the head of Africa, who was a French person named George. And so I ended up to be talking to him, and then I explained my passion and why I wanted to be moving to the continent. And he started to be introducing me to the right offices and right people to talk to. And then that's how I made my transition to be moving to Kenya. But also at the same time, I was always keen to like learn about the public sector as well. So I've been spent 3 years and a half back in Tokyo for the private sector work. So when I moved to Africa, and also the another reason for McKinsey, Africa was the center for, or like origination of the public sector work, supporting government and multinationals. So I wanted to be in the heart of where it has been started. So all of these things came together. I've been the part of the Africa Delivery Hub, which was the public sector serving team. So I joined to McKinsey at the beginning of 2017 after my time in the Middle East. And then I started my career based in Kenya. But this office is covering the entire, so the public sector work covered the entire continent out of 5 different offices. And it doesn't really matter which office you have been based. If there's a need, you're going to be directed to different offices. So I had my experience to work for 7 different projects across 5 different countries, namely Kenya, Nigeria, Ethiopia, South Africa, and Cote d'Ivoire, or the Ivory Coast. So yeah, I mean, I think that was my time down there. And then I think I got to the point that I have learned enough, I have done enough as a consultant, and that I wanted to be a bit closer to the impact. And then I wanted to be on the driver's seat rather than being on the strategic side or someone's behind to influence their decision. I wanted to be more closer to the impact to actually start leading the changes. So I think that's led me to deciding to leave McKinsey and moving to the startup world.
Sure. Yeah, that's very well thought out as always. And seems like it was definitely very beneficial to you. I think a lot of these credentials, whether it's the MBA or working for a big company like McKinsey, I think maybe the biggest gift that it gives you is that self-confidence, as you mentioned, that if you're able to do that, then you can do pretty much anything. And then even if you're the same person, you have that confidence that you knew that you could do that. And so you can go start a business or do whatever else you want to do. But I was wondering if you could talk about your next steps, why the startup world is what attracted you, why you decided to do a startup in Kenya after working there for McKinsey. And you just could explain a little bit more about your journey at Safe Boda and then maybe how that eventually led you to starting Peach Tech.
Sure. Yeah. So I think, one of the things I've been starting to be feeling or a little bit like starting to be frustrated for me toward the end of my career at McKinsey, because I become a manager. So I started to be feeling like, okay, 70 to 80% of the work I am doing here on the ground could have been done from anywhere else in the world. So one of the biggest upside of myself being based in Kenya at the time was to able to expose myself to the market here and then learn and start thinking of what are the interesting business opportunity, what are the issues that exist, what I want to be solving for. Clearly, like once I was a manager at the consulting firm, my work becoming to manage my team and asking my team to go and interviewing people, look into doing some research, etc. So my job was more on the management side. And then I started to be like losing my opportunity to expose myself to the market itself. So I think that was one of the things. And then also at the same time, I have a super long list of all what I wanted to achieve being at the consulting firm. And then I crossed every single item I wanted to do by that time. So for me was like naturally, okay, so what's next? What I want to do next? And then I start thinking about what I want to do next. And one of the things was closer to me. And then I was always been excited about was to be on the startup side of the world. I think how quickly the things can be different and how quickly things can move, how much of the impact you can create and you can feel that changes being on the driver's seat was something I was missing being as a consultant. So I thought that will be great. And also in the smaller organization, obviously the things are like less stable, but also at the same time, I could have my opportunity to have a slightly larger responsibilities from day one, and then can really try to influencing the entire company and also the team, and then also our customers. So I think that was one of the reasons I started to be like leading toward to the startup world. And when I started to be thinking about which industry or what type of the work I wanted to do, like I was always thinking of like depths and coverage. So like horizontal coverage and then the depths in the vertical side of how much of the impact I can create on something. So in my mind, I was really passionate about the education and also on the mobility side, because I feel like mobility side can actually give me a lot of like great coverage on the horizontal side. What does it mean is like it's going to be affecting every single person's life from the age of 9 till like age of, whatever, maybe until you actually die. I think highly probably you need a transportation solution. You need to have a mobility for yourself or something to move for you. So I thought, and then if you can, save some time down there, like people can be targeting or like reusing or like repurposing this extra time for themselves, either for their own hobby, to study or to do whatever they want to do. And then that was kind of something I really liked. I kind of, in a funny way, sometimes people mention, hey, like we want to give a fish to someone or we want to teach someone how to fish. And then I think I rather prefer the second than just giving the fish in that sense. And then like if you can free up your own time, you can use that time for something to learn for yourself or whatsoever. So I feel like transportation mobility is one way to kind of giving people an extra opportunity as a time to like addressing the issues. And then the another one for the education was maybe the opposite. It might be only affecting a slightly more limited number of the people and then in some certain age, but we could potentially be able to affecting their life decision etc. more in depth. So that's what I meant by the vertical, like a depth in that sense. And I was always trying to compare these two, which makes more sense, which can actually creating the overall larger impact as a spare space in a way, or surface space. So that's how I've been thinking about that. And then I went to meet a lot of different startups in the continent, also outside of the continent as well. And then I started to be really like way more getting into the mobility solutions was one of the things I was very, very much excited about. And also I think some of the time, like it doesn't, which industry you work for, which company you work for matters, but also what roles you do or what roles you've been fulfilling is also matters a lot too. So from that perspective, I was curious to be somehow in the driver's seat in between operational building, but also on the strategic element. So I ended up finding this opportunity to become a VP of expansion at Safe Buddha, which is leading the entire international expansion. So they had their proven business model already in Uganda, and then they wanted to be expanding that one into Kenya and also to Nigeria. So that was what I've been excited to take on, because I can technically see the entire elements of starting something from scratch, just apart from the business model. So that was something quite exciting for me and quite well in line with what I want to do in the longer term. So I just decided to take that opportunity and that I have joined Sega as their VP of expansion. And then I think it was quite a fascinating experience because from day one, I just need to like really learn the business model, how that things works and how this can be expanded to a different part of the continent and how to design the market entry strategy. But also at the same time, I need to hire the team and building the operation. So I really had my opportunity to like do all of that, including the ground leg work too. And then that was like very exciting for me for a while. And then that was the beginning of 2019. So we have launched a few operations in Kenya in that year. And then we were set to launch our operations in Nigeria in 2020, which has happened in March. I was on the ground in Nigeria, but then that was the time that COVID started. So then SafeBoard was at the time of the fundraising as well. So, I mean, obviously that was not a great timing to have a fundraising. So some of the committed amount etc. were not coming through due to the COVID. And then one of the first things as SafeBoard did, which I still believe was the right decision, is to like closing down the expansion because we need to get into the survival mode rather than expanding. So that has happened. I moved inside of the organization. So first I closed my own team and then I need to move inside to a different role, but that role was more like internal consulting role. So I wasn't really excited enough about that new role. And then that also affected my performance and my own motivations. So that was a good decision for both myself and also to the company that I shall be leaving. So that has happened in early 2020, like a mid 2020. And then after I left, to be honest, I quit my job before I know what I'm going to do next. And then after I left, I started to be thinking about, okay, so what I want to do next. I think I have learned a few different things. And then also some of my mentors and then our current existing investors who also been my mentors really helped my journey from there. So a few examples, but one of a senior entrepreneur person who is a founder of another startup here in the continent. When I was talking to him, he was like, "Hey, Kaoru, I think you've been based in here for like 4 or 5 years by now. You definitely know the market. You should have your own idea of what might be an exciting opportunity or like what might be the interesting market opportunity that you're going to be solving for, or you shall be able to finding a sticky issue that you really want to stick to try to solve for." I really liked how he said of this like a sticky issue, because I think if I were to say what makes entrepreneur resilient, someone like myself type of the person or personality, I will say stickiness is very important, because if that's important enough for you to solve, even you might see a lot of difficulties, you might push yourself through to try to solve it. So I think I really like that way. So I start to be like, really looking into what is a sticky issue I want to be solving. And I start to be figuring out what that was, how we can make this secondary market more efficient, or how I can help used items being transacted more efficiently and more easily. And so maybe that's one way. And then the another person who was actually, sounds like a little bit crazy, but when I was talking to the person, he was, "Hey, you know what, Kaoru, you've been talking about maybe one day you might want to do something by yourself. World is having all this COVID situation. We don't really know what's going to happen next. So maybe this is the best moment for you to take a pause and think through and really figuring out what you want to do." And my answer to his comment was like, "Hey, I appreciate that and I would love to do it, but I don't really have enough money after working for the startup. And then, it's really tough for me to take that time and funding myself." And then his answer was like, "Look, Kaoru, if that's only hurdle that you have in front of you, let me sort it out for you. Like if you need, I will transfer 100K tomorrow, by tomorrow to your bank account. You can think of this as short term, like a borrowing, or worst case scenario, you don't even need to like return to me. I would prefer you to be flourishing and taking a risk and challenging on something rather than just being at the corner of somewhere and just thinking about, okay, I need to find my job to make my life." It sounds really like a crazy offer. And then obviously I didn't take it because I was not ready to commit for that one. Then, that sounded like irresponsible of myself to say yes to that one. So rather I have asked him, "Hey, like one day if I figure out the business model correct and if I know what I'm really passionate about, do you mind to be my first investor?" And he was like, "Look, I will be super happy to be in that matter." And then he is actually our first investor at Current. Or he became our first investor on the day one when I started. So I think these people really helped me pushing through, gave me an opportunity to think through what I would like to do. And I think that's also gave me enough space to think through different business model, talking to the different people, exchanging ideas, etc., to really like get into what I would like to solve for. And yeah, maybe after 3 to 6 months time, I made it through. And then what I am currently be doing, it's a matchmaking platform for quality use vehicles here in the continent, which is a value adding marketplaces. Yeah, so that's the business I'm running. But I think these people's comments and supports and some insight and some e-learnings that they had, which they have shared with me, helped me to finding what I wanted to work for.
Sure. Yeah. The entrepreneurial journey is not easy. So it always helps a ton to have that level of support. The guy willing to wire you 100K for nothing is clearly showing a huge amount of trust in you. I guess maybe I kind of have two places I want to go with this, but maybe first you could talk a little bit about that first investor and how you developed that relationship with him. I'd be interested in knowing a little bit more about that and why he developed that huge amount of trust in you. And then maybe secondly, if you could also, before talking about what Peach Tech's successes are so far, just maybe the thinking behind the impact that a used car marketplace could make in a place like Kenya or East Africa.
Sure. Yeah. So maybe try to answer into the first one quickly. So the person who actually have offered me that massive amount of the support and being our first investor at Current, he being my mentor and he being used to be my colleagues at McKinsey. So he being my boss in that sense. I worked with him on some of this 120 hours working week And he been definitely like someone who read me during that time and who also helped me. Obviously, we had a lot of fight. And then also not necessarily a fight, but like a rather disagreement on some stuff. We need to be pushed back. I need to push back on some etc. But I think that professional experience, I worked closely to like maybe 10 months in total with him in 2-3 different projects. All of them are very intense, but I think that experience enabled us to be bonding very strong. And also, interestingly enough, after I left for my MBA, he left McKinsey. He became a CEO of one of the startup, and he successfully made that company brick. And so he been having some extra like wealth out of it that he actually been made throughout his own journey. And now he's been sitting as he does a bit of the angel investment, also being a part of the VC. And also now he's running another startup, way larger startup doing different stuff. But so I think that was how it was. And then at some point, he actually even invited me to join his startup as one of the C-level, which obviously I told him like I would prefer to have my international career. So I said no to that. But I think I've been always in contact with him and he's been a great mentor to me. So I think that's how I build up a strong trust. I do have the similar trust on him. So if he said something, I know he will keep his word too. So I think that has been achieved throughout my intense, crazy professional career to some extent. That's my short answer. And then, since then, up until today, he's been really a great mentor to me. So if I really need to make some decision or something I'm not sure, I wanted to discuss with another entrepreneur or someone being a founder of a company, he might be my go-to person. So maybe that's answering to your first question. Sorry, what was the second question again?
Yeah, no problem. The second was just about, and I think you covered this already a little bit, so we may not necessarily need to go into it, but just how much of an impact is it to be able to make it easier for people to sell used items, whether it's cars or something else in Kenya or East Africa?
Yeah, I do believe, I think this, shared economy, circular economy, etc., is way stronger and way powerful in the resource constrained places. Unfortunately, most of them are the emerging markets, including Africa. So, in here, I think one car can be served. Maybe in US, maybe in Japan, most of the time, one car might be serving for one person or the part of the family. But one car in here is serving the entire family member, even your colleagues, your friends, etc. So you can actually carpooling and make it way efficient of commuting, moving from point A to point B. Some of my current team member at the company, spending maybe 2 to 3 hours sometime on commute. Because if you can go straight from our office to their house, directly on the car, maybe it only takes 20 minutes or 30 minutes. But as the local transportation system is not that efficient, so they need to go to the city center once, changing to the another bus line, and then coming back again out to the outskirts, and they need to change once again and go back home. So they might need to have a true transiting. It's going to be covering 3x distance per se in total for them to be able to get back home. So one way to think is how much of this one car or one asset can be shared and can really impacting a number of the people is quite different from other part of the world. And then also here, because of the income level is also not that super high, but yet the cost price is way higher. So for instance, the used cars pricing here in Kenya is roughly saying double to 3x of Japan. Why is because, they are buying, or the Japan being the main supplier of the used vehicle for the East Africa, and then they need to be shipped from Japan to here, and then also they have the duty that the government is imposing, etc. We're almost doubling the value of the car here, and then then income level is maybe half of Japan or 1/3 of Japan. So how you feel of this type of higher price wise, you might feel it's 6x expensive to buy a car. So maybe if you were to buy $5,000 car, that what you're looking for right now, maybe it's going to be becoming $30,000 US equivalent purchase, which is way larger and which is more important. So I think the really like creating the efficiency way to handle this like a larger asset or feeding like a way larger asset to the people is really important, because that will be affecting your purchase decision, how easily you can liquidizing it, how you can actually reset it, and then you can move on to something else. That might be affecting on the micro level. On the macro perspective, like the wealth that could have stayed inside of the country needed to be drained out to the different country if they cannot do that. Because whenever you import a new car or like fresh imports, or when you need to like even importing different electronics, etc., every single time the money you're paying for them on the back of the seller, it will be going to somewhere else outside of the country. So the wealth could have stayed in the country or in the continent, now need to be moved to somewhere else. So we can also change that. And also by prolonging the lifetime of the used vehicle, especially in a good quality one, will be having a significant positive impact on the CO2 emissions and a few other stuff too. I think these days people talk about the EVs, and then used car sounds like the opposite of it. But if you really think of the entire input need to be going into building up one EV versus one conventional or the combustion engine model, it's considered to be requiring 5 to 7x of the input from rare metals, and also how much more you need to dig different surface of the earth is quite different. So there were some interesting research is also coming out, but when the EV being launched, you might not need to be emission anything for a while, but whenever you need to change the battery to the new one, when you get a new battery, it also requires a lot of input, because battery is full of rare metals and all those things. So that overall impact to the environment is also quite significant. So there are some researchers saying prolonging the existing car's lifetime is way better than purchasing or producing an EV, which is a very interesting discussion point. And some of my friends who are in the more a clean tech investment side of the world also mentioned the same to me at some points. I think while they start looking into total required carbon emission and also the input for the entire production to the lifetime of the product. So I think there are different elements I can think of how much impact we can create. That's maybe from the product side, but also for job creation opportunity, because obviously car is such a big asset and such an important asset. So for us to really being able to do a proper inspection as creating a new almost industry or new job opportunity for the car to be properly being inspected, that's also affecting a lot. And then, on the downside of the used car market is cars being used sometimes by a con man to tweak them. So, I mean, in Kenya, almost every week or at least every month, if you open the newspaper, it says, hey, this person gave me a too good to be true offer, and it was too attractive. So I ended up to be sending the money to try to purchase that vehicle. And following day, when I went to pick up the car, the house was empty or the office was gone. So it's, kind of a pure fraudulent transactions or a fake transaction could potentially be happening. And then also, sometimes you take a car for a viewing and pretend to be a buyer and to be a person who wanted to steal the vehicle. So sometimes you go to someone's house to show the car, and then you at gunpoint, then car being taken. And sometimes these people been involved or, unfortunately, losing their life has happened in the past. And it also could happen because some of our external independent brokers recently got into a similar type of issues. And also selling a car, meaning when you go and show the vehicle, you need to meet the potential buyer or the potential seller face to face. And that also opened up some of the opportunity or the loopholes for the sexual harassment and more of a gender mix being an issue type of situation multiple times. That's what we've been hearing from our past customers too. So I think from the process, from the product, from total emissions, etc., whatever the angle you wanted to see, there's so many way to talk about the impact. And I think that's what we've been addressing for, and these are the impact that we believe is currently making.
Sure, amazing. I mean, love businesses like this, and I think it's more possible to start them in emerging markets where you can address a huge market inefficiency and then also make people's lives easier, improve the economy, make an impact on the environment, make transactions safer and more efficient for people. It's all great. Maybe you can talk about the actual steps of starting the business, what it's like being someone running a business in a developing economy like Kenya is, and just how you've grown. I mean, I know that you've achieved 5x growth since your seed round, so clearly doing very well. Maybe just talk about some of the strategies that you've used to grow and kind of the day-to-day operations, what it's been like running a business in a country like Kenya.
Yeah, I think, like all businesses, regardless of where you're going to be running a business, I think you're going to be facing a lot of difficulties, and obviously there will be a lot of like up and down in general, I assume. So I am not sure because I don't really have my experience to be an entrepreneur anywhere else in the world. So I'm not sure if I can compare these things well. But I think this was definitely more tricky and more difficult than I thought when I started. People, it's kind of one of the joke I might sometimes making, but like people says, oh, CEO, chief executive officer sounds fancy, but I think the reality is chief everything officer. So like I was literally on the ground, like try to setting a car on one, like for the first 1 hour, the next 1 hour is try to figuring out the like, legal framework, how to do. The another 1 hour is maybe I'm like running after the regulatory regulations of try to get the correct licenses for my company to be here. Sometimes I need to be like running after my own like immigration status to have the like legitimate work permit, and then also at the same time, once the business start to be moving forward, looking for the supply, looking for the demand, and then I need to like looking for my team as well. So like it's literally doing everything. And I think there's way more like loopholes and inefficiency in so many different schemes, like starting from the legal side, taxations, regulations. Like there's a lot of like different loopholes that I never even imagined when I started. And then also like we've been started this company and then like with the mission of, hey, how we can make this used items transaction more efficient. And we ended up in a car. So kind of finding out how we can do the best inspection within the market on the global standard. That's also the other things we've been trying to figure out in the early days. So, as you can imagine, it's like it's really everything, like all these things coming into places. And I just need to like give a priority, go one by one. What matters the most for today is to sell one more car, then I will take on it. If we need to solve all this like regulatory issues so that we won't be like, or the government won't coming after us, etc., then I need to take up on it. So I think it's really like my life being an entrepreneur, especially for the first maybe a year, was like being scattered all over. And maybe I had one fear in the early days, which is now a bit less, is when I was a solo founder, when I started the company, one of the things I've been facing was like my imagination and my capability and my capacity becoming the limit of the growth of the company, which I thought it's not necessarily been positive. I thought that's not healthy because if something being all limited by my own ability, one human being can do is very limited. That's why we need to have a team. So I think that was also like, very early days concern that I have. And then that maybe kept me awake till like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. every day to kind of make it through a day. And then I was like fighting against like a lack of time or the lack of capacity within the organization, try to make it up for it. But I think how we found this like a business model was like really coming from our stickiness and what I'm really passionate about was solving this locally available items to be transacted more fluently and more easily and more efficiently. So that was the first element. And second was our appreciation to the mobility. And third element is like when we start in a business, we also, especially in the emerging market, we need to be ready to do a vertically integrated business model. What does that mean is like, let's say if we wanted to make a marketplace in the US or in Japan, maybe you just need to creating a system working for the transaction only, or like making the communication in between buyer and seller easy, and then everything else can happen. If you have the infrastructure to support that transaction from the financial perspective, like escrow account, and then if you have the logistics solution that, any items can be delivered within a few days. And then if you have all of these things as an infrastructure, it's easy. You can plug in and pray on it. But unfortunately here, I think it's not available. So when we started this business, we were definitely ready to do like everything end to end. So up to today, we do the inspection by ourselves. So we have our own escrow account that we handle all the payment from our buyers and seller. So we're going to be receiving the money once into our escrow account. We will hold that one up until the owner bring the car and handing over the car to us, and also doing all the paperwork for changing of the ownership, etc. That's the only one time we're going to be releasing the money to the current owner. So I think maybe like at starting, I think we needed to have way more thought process, and also we cannot just only focusing on the one functionality of the business if you were to deciding to design the entire end-to-end solution. So maybe that could have been a bit more tricky, and then like made us a little bit difficult to be focusing on, or like really just building one small niche and then try to make it scale. We needed to be the kind of starting from like broader coverage. So maybe that's what I can say, or if I were to think back, maybe it could have been different if it were to start in a different country. But also I think there's a lot of like interesting opportunity as well, because for instance, used car market in Japan is like highly dominant by maybe 3 specific online auction players who has maybe 80 to 90% of the supply. So if you wanted to play in that industry, you need to be play on their like rules in a way. And then there was not that many like space remaining to intervene. But here in Kenya, like we don't really have that much like a massively like established company yet. So I think by now we are transacting around 40 to 50 cars on the monthly basis at current. And that's already made us the biggest marketplace and potentially a dealership here in Kenya, focusing on the locally used cars, so the locally available cars, which is quite fascinating because I think the other companies are really like a lifetime business model, selling maybe 3 to 5 cars a month. And then so it's like a super long tail or like a only tail type of industry. So when we come with the intervention here, I think we got way more positive responses without like a less competition. And we could really like benefiting these existing businesses and also to really helping the end users both on the supplier side and demand side. So I think that was clearly like upside that we can create a system to play with, rather than we need to play with someone else's rules.
Sure, definitely. I think that's the exciting thing about it is it's not just replicating a business model that's already there or kind of plugging and playing what might have worked elsewhere. You're really creating the solution from scratch, which is exciting, but also difficult, I'm sure. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how your role as CEO has evolved now that you have more than 80 employees there, and also what your goals are. I believe you're about to raise your Series A. So why are you raising the Series A, and where do you think it's going to take the company? What are your priorities for growth and expansion?
Sure. Yeah. So I think like in the longer term, or like, in the next few years, we've been thinking of really try to like penetrating into the Nairobi market this year. Next year, we want to be like kind of inside of Kenyan expansion. And maybe following year, we're going to be wanting to be start expanding internationally within the region. So Tanzania, Uganda, etc. So I think like, let's say in 3 to 5 years down the line, we wanted to be operating in the multiple countries, solving the similar issues that the people are facing. Entry point will be the used vehicles, really creating transparency, circularity, and also having the customer centricity in our mind. And we really wanted to designing our business model well. So I think that's where we are aiming at. And then also, I think in 5-6 years time, I think we can be a self-sustainable, profitable company per se. So I think these are like, the higher level goal that we want to be achieving. And also by then we can be the biggest matchmaking platform / dealership in entire Sub-Saharan Africa. So that's where we are aiming at, if you were to ask me in a few years time. And also like, me being a CEO, to be honest, I am not sure if I'm the right CEO once the company is 5x or 10x from now on. Because I think from there, it's going to be more of the CEO's roles will be more to like really like leading the company, making sure everyone is heading to the same direction, rather than like creating a new system and schemes and then like leading people, like leading a smaller team or kind of the sizable team that you can still knowing who is doing what to some extent. So I think once that time comes, and also like by then, my hope is to finding a capable person from the continent or from Kenya who can take over this business from me. And I might be shifting my roles either to the limited functionality of keep on like launching into the new country is one way, or like really to start thinking of like a new service line CTC. So I might be still at the company, but maybe not in the CEO's function. It's rather executive, like leading a new different business models or the expansion or some thought, which kind of, still makes my skill relevant and very value adding to the entity. I think that might be my like a longer term goal. And then how my roles has been changing since I have started, to be honest. I think it's changed drastically. Like maybe the first year and a half was really like, as I have said, I was doing everything, like all the product work, all the way to the setting, etc. All of them was with me. Then I need to get all of them done within the time frame. So that's one. And then I think from there, as the team like getting larger, like maybe the first things I need to think was, okay, who are the other key team member, the key person we need to have within the organization? So I got my co-founder joining 6 months after I launched the company, and that was super helpful. He been our COO for the last 3 years and a half now. And then he been really helped me building this company together. And also at the same time, we start to be hiring. We have the chief of staff and we have the CTO right now. So compared to when we started, we have at least like 3 to 4 C-levels who can actually lead this company together with me and can also make decisions. So I think my biggest, still a little bit of struggle that we are trying to like really like solving for in midterm is really like how much of the decisions that I might need to be making in a day. I think I do have my capacity of, I don't know, maybe it's like 50 decisions per day or 100 decisions per day. Obviously, how heavy it is or how important it is will be affecting how much energy it will be taking from me to think through, and then also the time and efforts as well. But I think we do have some certain limits. And then I think now one of my job or one of the important things for me is how I can dedicate this decision making to the rest of the team. They might not necessarily be making 100% the same or like 100% correct decision or like 100% same decision as compared to what I might make. But that's not the most important things. I think we just need to be creating a system and the organization that other people are encouraged to make a decision and their decision to be like 80% correct decision, making a better decision than the best decision. I think that's okay. And then I think that's the only way that organization can grow. So I think at the beginning I was doing everything. Now I'm way more start thinking of hiring the right people, having the right team, dedicating more to the rest of the team and then also the rest of the C-suite where I can. And then really try to be focusing my time and effort to where I can add the biggest value to, which is that current is partially it's for the fundraising, partially it is to like talk with the external people, and some of them is including attracting the talent that we would like to hire to convince them to join and being with us and being the part of our change and growth together. So I think it's becoming a bit more like a systematic way of approaching it. And then I don't need to be in the field every single day to dealing with the buyer, the sellers anymore. So it's kind of like my roles shifting based on what I have done to make it into the system, make it more replicable, and then also to delegating more work and then really building up the right team and really setting up the foundation of the company correct. If I were to say in a short word, I think that's how it's been changing so far.
Amazing. Yeah, I think that's really smart. And I think you're right with that.
One thing actually I forgot to mention is maybe another difficulty is as the company grow, how we can actually ensure our company's culture and values be maintained. Because in the end of the day, our value is transparency and then being customer centric. If we start to be forgetting about it as the company grow, like from 10 people to 80 people, and if you are not really good at pushing that agenda, making sure these things lives with the people's value, I think we can easily lose our focuses, which means also we're going to be losing our key differentiator from any other players in the market and also like our value prop. So I think that's also the very important element, which I was not really thinking when I have started, to be honest.
Sure. First of all, it's really smart to grow a company that way. And I think that's the type of low ego leadership that actually is successful, knowing that you might be right from this stage where someone else can come in, and having a team and a partnership takes you much further than going alone. And I appreciate what you said about building the culture. I was curious what your methods for building that culture are. Do you look for certain things when you hire people? Is your leadership style lend itself to that type of culture at all? Like how do you ensure that the company follows that culture?
Yeah, I think that's a very difficult question. And then, to be honest, I don't think I have my right answer to it yet. But so far, my attempt is maybe the following. One is to really try to looking into the right people when you hire them, especially in the earlier stage of the company. I mean, we don't really have the luxury to train and push people to become someone slightly bit different. So we might need to hire more of the ready-made talent whose values is overlapping with ours. So I think that can be done throughout better interviews and recruitment process, etc. So one is to hire the right people, someone who actually shares some of the value. I don't necessarily want the entire company to be the same. So obviously there will be a diversity, there will be a differences, obviously. But I think what we've been trying to pushing for is to making sure the core values are aligned and we have the right people who actually enjoy it or who is happy, who is very motivated to go with it. So one is really to try to hire the right people who cares about the honesty, who cares about transparency, who cares about what we do and how we do. So I think that's one. Second is also kind of keeping the same promise within the organization. So we really try to pushing our effort to make the company flat and open, less non-hierarchical in that sense, to really make it more approachable how senior the person is, and also to keep it open. And then we really try to have the ownership respecting others and challenging ourselves to be better than today. And then these are the three things I have just mentioned of the ownership, respect, and actually challenge is our core value. But I think these are the things that we need to also have an opportunity to demonstrating by the leaders. So our managers, myself included, all the senior member leading the company need to be showcasing this value to the rest of the organization. And also we need to have an opportunity to remind these things to the rest of the team through the town halls, all hands meetup, BTC, whatever the setup it is. I think it's really important that we're going to be keep on reminding people. And then also when you start to be hearing a bit of concerning stories somewhere in the organization that these key values might not be followed or start to be falling into crack, it's the time that we need to take a necessary action and try to addressing, which most of the time can happen by proper meetup, explaining if it's needed one-on-one conversation with them. Sometimes disciplinary action is also matters. We don't want to be a harsh company, but also at the same time to keep people accountable. Sometimes we need to take this action. So for instance, if someone decided to release the vehicle, as we've been a matchmaking platform. So for instance, if we were to release a vehicle to our buyer, we need to get the buy-in or we need to have the permission, ideally the proper written agreement from the seller. But for instance, if these things has not been followed, we might need to actually give an official warning, etc., so that people will understand that's the line that they should not be crossing to. And then I think having a few of these cases also helping people to understand in the practical terms of where the boundary sits. I mean, obviously, it's a very difficult balance to strike because we want to be making a open and flat working environment, but also at the same time, we need to be making sure that accountability is down there too. So those are the few things we've been trying. So when we see the red flag, we also take an action. We try to communicate well. When we onboarding people, we also have a bit of session talking about when and why the cultures and values are important by using our actual live cases that has happened in the past, going through that one with them so that they can actually understand why the cultures and all these things might matter when it is a stressful moment or when it's in a catastrophic situation than day to day. If everything's going well, no one really need to think too much about the culture from my perspective. But I think the cultures and all of these things is more and more getting important when some difficult situation happens from my perspective. So that's how we've been communicating these things. And we try to keep the higher standard by demonstrating these values by ourselves to some extent.
Sure. Yeah, I think in catastrophes is when the real culture comes out. It's a good point. And
Yeah, 100%.
I think open communication, healthy boundaries, that's the way to do it. I guess one other question I have is that it seems that you have plans to be in Africa and Kenya for the long term, at least, at the very least next 5-6 years based on what you were saying. I was curious if you could talk a little bit about why you like living in that part of the world. What are your favorite aspects of living in Kenya and how daily life is there and if it's different at all from any other places that you've lived in?
Sure. A lot of things is maybe different. And also I think people has a different preferences. So I'm not sure this is the best place for everyone. But from my perspective, I think it's a very nice place to be based. One is because of the weather. Everyone might believe it's just below the equator. So, people might be believing, oh, it's going to be super hot, etc., which is not. Because Nairobi is 1,700 meter above the sea level. So kind of the temperature whole year is in between maybe 5 degrees at Celsius at lowest up to maybe 25 degrees Celsius. So it's kind of always either the t-shirts or just one lighter jacket is sufficient. So it's really such a nice weather. And also the rainy season is not too long, so you can really enjoy that natural light and being outside. And I think it's also a really green city and also a green country in general, a lot of natures. And if you like outdoor activities, you have a lot of places that you can go for hiking, camping, fishing if you want to as well. And then also from Nairobi, if you drive 3 hours into the mountainside, I think you're going to be in the middle of the wilderness. And then if you take a flight in 45 minutes, you're going to be in one of the most beautiful beaches in the entire world. So, I think it's a very good balance, especially if you like outdoor sports and being in outdoor things. And then I think if you love nature, I think this is a place to be. And then also the city, Nairobi itself, is such an international city. So it's kind of sizable. It's not too small. So it's not too small in a way that everyone knows who is dating who, which is happening in some other smaller cities, unfortunately, in the region, even it's the capital. It's not that small, but you can be very well connected to the people in the city. So for instance, I think I know maybe a good chunk of other founders, and I have enough friends that I know in town that if I were to looking for someone to be connected to DC, I can find that connections relatively easy. And so it's kind of a sizable, yet not too big, still fitting the sense of the community here and very international. And then I think that's been accepted from the Kenyan side too. And then also comparing to when I was in South Africa and a few other places, sometimes I feel some of the races or the nationality could be so kind of not living together or kind of being separated within the city, which is not the case in here. I think it's a very well mingled, across to each other city. So I think that also makes me more confident and happy to be based in here in that sense. Yeah, and then for me, I love camping. I have my rooftop tent on the top of my car. I'm driving 1997 year of make Land Cruiser, which can go anywhere. And then so I can technically take this car sometime going to the wilderness and having a wildlife camping. And then maybe that's one of the best way for me to be free, offline, so that even someone, or if I want to reach out to someone, I cannot reach out to them. These days, sometimes Starlink is splitting it out because if I have them, I can be connected almost everywhere. But that's on the side. But yeah, so I think those are the few of maybe the positive side I can talk about. And then people might think about the city is too dangerous, not safe, etc. But obviously it's the same to most of the other cities. There are some area that not a nice neighborhood, so maybe you need to be more careful to be down there. But in general, I think I've been based in here for the last 7 years and a half. I never had any serious problems, etc. So if you've been a proper mindful person to be based in here, that's not an issue either.
Sure. It sounds like an amazing place. I know that Nairobi is getting more and more popular for international businesses, and based on what you're saying, I can see why people would want to live there. And it's awesome that you have that nature nearby as well. It's always a huge luxury.
And then a lot of people come here for, a few weeks internship or something, and they end up to be based in here for a few years. I know a few people who ended up being that way. So I think what you were saying is very much correct. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Definitely speaks for itself. I guess, one last question would be, do you have a why or a life purpose that guides you in what you do?
I saw that question that you have sent to me, and then I was thinking about it. I think it's very difficult to answer. But if I were to answer, I think I do have after I thought a little bit about it. I think my core value, me as a person, not necessarily as a company, like I do have a very strong sense of I really want to make these things fair. And I think that's really bugged me since I was smaller. And I think I am trying to be solving many of the issues because of that. What the fairness means in that sense is I still really feel like it's not fair if someone being born in one country being better than the another country. I don't think that's fair. So making a different life decision, etc. I really believe in the opportunity, etc. So I really want to make it fair for everyone to have a similar level of the opportunity. If you are really into it, you can make it happen. And then also, I think that's coming from why I'm doing this business of transparency and customer centricity and trustworthy business building is because I think that's the closest way to make something fair to someone. Because if you end up to be buying a car without knowing the condition, that's not fair for the person. And then if you are selling a car, which is maybe worth way more money or way less money for a different price point, that's also not fair for the owner too. So I think really one thing I'm really trying to achieve an over theme for me is how I can achieve the fairness. And then I think that's really a strong principle for myself. And I think I might be pushing it sometime a little bit too strong to my rest of my team as well. But I think fairness is one. And then also the another things is I think I do have this feeling of I would prefer to regret of the actions I have taken rather than the things I did not take an action. So I would prefer to be the part of a change than just seeing it or being an observer. So that also makes me going a little bit of the extra mile sometime to kicking myself to take a necessary action and try to keep myself going forward.
Amazing. Both great things to live by. Thank you so much for Kaoru. I really enjoyed this podcast. It was really great getting to know you and learn more about the amazing work that you are doing.
Cool. Thank you very much for your time. And then, it was definitely a fun time and then also a great opportunity to reflect, thinking back my life and career and then kind of revisiting why I made that decision is always give me a new aspect. So I also really enjoy this opportunity. So thank you very much again for taking your time and also giving me an opportunity to be on your program. Thank you.
Sure. You're welcome.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the INSEAD Emerging Markets Podcast. To stay up to date on events we may be hosting, emerging market news, and to build your personal network, please feel free to join the INSEAD Alumni Emerging Markets Interest Group on LinkedIn.